Hey everyone, I'm your author June. Before we get started, I really would appreciate it if everyone could hit the subscribe button. It helps me grow the channel, and I would love for all of you to come on this journey with me, as a family. Now, let's get into the story. Let me know if you enjoy. The sun, a relentless eye in the vast cerulean sky, beat down on the parched earth of Promise Creek, Arizona. Dust, fine as flour, coated everything: the worn leather of my chaps, the rough denim of my shirt, even the taste in my mouth. I was Caleb Thorne, a farmhand by trade, a drifter by nature. My life was a series of sunrises and sunsets, hard labor, and the quiet companionship of horses. Plans? I never made 'em. Ambition? Never caught up to me. I just drifted, following the work, seeking nothing more than a fair day's wage and a roof over my head. The Weston Ranch, a sprawling expanse of land that stretched towards the distant mountains, was my latest stop. It was called the Whispering Pines, though the only whispering I'd heard since I arrived was the wind through the dry scrub brush. It was a good ranch, honest work, though the air about it felt heavy, burdened by unspoken worries. That burden, I'd soon learn, had a name: Lydia Weston. She was a woman carved from the very land she fought to protect. Her hair, the color of rich earth, was usually braided tightly, escaping in wisps around a face that, despite the dust and sun, held a delicate beauty. Her eyes, the color of a summer sky, held a fierce determination, a stubborn pride that even the harsh Arizona sun couldn't diminish. She wore practical skirts and sturdy boots, her hands calloused from work. Yet there was an undeniable grace to her movements, whether she was mending a fence or calming a skittish horse. She was the sole inheritor of the Whispering Pines, and everyone in Promise Creek knew she was fighting a losing battle. The trouble, as I'd pieced together from hushed conversations around the communal dinner table, was her uncle, Silas Weston. A man whose ambition was as vast and unforgiving as the desert itself. He coveted the Whispering Pines. He saw only profit, not the legacy woven into every acre. The ranch, according to her late father's will, would revert to Silas if Lydia, unmarried by her 25th birthday, failed to maintain its solvency. Lydia's 25th birthday was weeks away, and the ranch, struggling against a prolonged drought and a dwindling herd, was teetering on the brink. I was fixing a broken fence line, the rhythmic clang of my hammer against wire, when I first saw her that fateful afternoon. She rode up on her bay mare, the horse's coat gleaming with sweat, her own face smudged with dirt. She dismounted, her movements precise and efficient, then walked towards me, her gaze steady, unwavering. The usual weariness in her eyes was replaced by a strange, unsettling resolve. "Caleb," she said, her voice clear, surprisingly calm for the storm brewing within her. I nodded, resting my hammer on a post. "Miss Weston." She stood before me, her hands clasped tightly, her knuckles white. She looked smaller than usual, yet radiated a desperate strength. "I have a proposition for you." I waited, my gaze steady. I'd heard many propositions in my life, most of them involving back-breaking work for little pay. Her eyes met mine, a flicker of vulnerability, then a hardened determination. "I need a husband, Caleb." The words hung in the hot, still air, as unexpected as a summer snow. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her right. "Mom?" "A temporary one," she clarified, her voice gaining a desperate edge. "Just until my 25th birthday passes. Until Silas's claim on the ranch is nullified. A marriage of convenience. A lie. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling. I need you to pose as my husband, Caleb, to save the Whispering Pines. My mind, usually slow and deliberate, churned. Marry? Me? A drifter? A man with no roots? No ties? The idea was preposterous. My life was simple, uncomplicated. This was complicated. It was a tangled web of deceit, of legal loopholes, of a desperate woman's fight for her home. But then I saw the raw desperation in her eyes, the quiet plea hidden beneath her resolute facade. I saw the land stretched out behind her, the sun-baked fields, the distant mountains, a testament to generations of Weston sweat and toil. And I saw the flicker of hope she held, fragile yet fiercely guarded. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and something stirred within me, something I hadn't known I possessed. It wasn't a romantic spark, not yet. It was a quiet sense of duty, a surprising urge to protect. This woman, this land, deserved a fighting chance. How long? I asked, my voice rougher than I intended. A few weeks, until the day after my birthday. Then we can get an annulment. You'll be compensated, of course. Her voice was laced with a desperate hope, fragile yet fiercely guarded. I considered it, the dust motes dancing in the sunlight around us. It was a crazy idea, a monumental deception. But the Whispering Pines was more than just a reg. It was a legacy, the dream. And Lydia Weston, despite her delicate appearance, was a fighter. "All right, Miss Weston," I said, the words surprising even myself. "I'll do it." Her breath hitched, a faint gasp escaping her lips. A flicker of relief, so profound it was almost painful to witness, washed over her face. A small, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her shoulders. "Thank you, Caleb," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. It was supposed to be a lie, a temporary arrangement." But as I watched her turn and walk back towards the ranch house, her silhouette framed by the harsh Arizona sun, I felt a strange shift within me. A quiet sense of purpose, a hint of something more than just a farmhand's usual stoicism. Lying, I suspected, was about to get very real. The news of our impending marriage, announced with a surprising lack of fanfare by Lydia herself, ripped through Promise Creek like a wildfire. Whispers followed me everywhere, in the general store, at the saloon, even in the fields. Caleb Thorne, the farmhand, marrying Lydia Weston? The disbelief was palpable, tinged with speculation and outright suspicion. Everyone knew Lydia's situation, knew Silas's ambitions. The timing, just weeks before her birthday, was too convenient to be coincidental. Lydia, however, faced the storm with a stoic defiance. She held her head high, her gaze unwavering, even when confronted by the sharp, scrutinizing eyes of the town matriarchs. She spun a simple tale, a quiet courtship, a blossoming affection, a desire for a swift, no-fuss union. It was a threadbare lie, but she delivered it with such conviction that it held, barely. Our engagement period was a crash course in deception. We had to appear as a couple, not just in public, but in the intimate confines of the ranch house. My small, humble room in the bunkhouse was abandoned for a shared bedroom in the main house, a room filled with her feminine touches, embroidered pillows, delicate lace curtains, the faint scent of lavender and dried herbs. It felt foreign, intrusive, yet strangely comforting. The creak of the floorboards outside her door, the soft rustle of her dress in the mornings, The quiet murmur of her voice as she spoke to herself, these small sounds, once unheard, now became a part of my daily rhythm. We practiced, awkwardly at first, how to sit beside each other at dinner, how to share a quiet moment on the porch, how to meet each other's gaze with something that resembled affection, not merely polite acknowledgement. Lydia, ever the pragmatist, approached it like another chore on the ranch, a task to be mastered. When we were around Silas, she'd instruct, her voice low and serious. You need to be possessive, not overly so, just enough to make it clear. And in public, a hand on my back, a shared glance. Little things that show we're a unit. I, in turn, offered my own crude advice. Don't look at me like I'm a stranger, Miss Weston. A wife looks at her husband with a comfort. Or annoyance. Whatever you usually feel. The last part was a weak attempt at humor, and a faint, fleeting smile touched her lips. A rare sight that softened the hard edges of her face. The hardest part was the physical proximity. We were sharing a room, a bed. It was a large four-poster bed, but it was still a shared space. We maintained a careful distance, an unspoken agreement that our arrangement was purely for show. I slept on my side, rigid, listening to the soft, rhythmic sound of her breathing, acutely aware of her presence, of the subtle shift of the mattress as she moved. The scent of lavender, once just a faint aroma, became intimately tied to her, a constant, comforting presence in the darkness. Silas Weston arrived 2 days before the wedding, a storm cloud on the horizon. He was a man built of sharp angles and calculating eyes, his smile a thin, cold slash across his face. He surveyed me with open skepticism, his gaze lingering on my calloused hands, my rough clothes. He knew I was just a farmhand. He suspected the truth. So, Lydia, my dear, he drawled, his voice oily. A sudden union, isn't it? Unexpected. He raised a perfectly manicured eyebrow, his gaze unwavering as it pinned me. Mr. Thorne, is it? What exactly is your profession? Farmhand, sir, I replied, my voice steady, meeting his gaze without flinching. And now, husband to Lydia. I consciously placed my hand on Lydia's back, a slow, deliberate movement. She stiffened for a fraction of a second, then leaned almost imperceptibly into my touch, a silent acknowledgement of our practiced charade. Silas's eyes narrowed, a flicker of suspicion, then a dismissive shrug. Well, I wish you both happiness. The word was laced with irony, a barely veiled threat. He would be watching. He would be waiting for us to falter. The wedding itself was a small affair, held at the Promise Creek Church, attended by a handful of curious townsfolk and a very suspicious Silas Weston. Lydia wore a simple cream-colored dress, softened by lace, her hair braided with a few white wildflowers. She looked beautiful, serene, despite the monumental lie we were about to tell. My own clothes, my best denim, and a freshly pressed shirt felt stiff and unfamiliar. When the preacher asked, "Do you, Caleb Thorne, take Lydia Weston?" My voice, when it came, was clear and firm. I do. It felt strange, foreign, yet undeniably real. The weight of her hand in mine as we exchanged vows was light, yet significant. The kiss, a brief, chaste touch of lips, was awkward, but publicly performed. It sealed the lie. As we walked out of the church, the sun shining brightly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Lydia's lips. It wasn't a smile of joy, but of triumph. The first hurdle was cleared. The ranch was safe, for now. But as I looked at her, my pretend wife, the woman who had asked me to become something I never intended to be. I felt a strange stirring within me. It was more than just duty. It was a sense of commitment, a surprising tenderness. This lie, I realized, was already weaving itself into the fabric of my life, deeper than I could have ever imagined. And lying, it turned out, never felt so real. Life, as a married man, even a pretend one, was a stark departure from my solitary existence. The rhythms of the ranch remained the same the early mornings, the endless chores, the taste of dust and sweat. But everything else was subtly, profoundly different. Lydia, my pretend wife, was now a constant, tangible presence in my life, her existence intertwined with mine in a way I hadn't anticipated. Our shared bedroom, initially a place of uncomfortable formality, slowly began to feel less alien. I found myself instinctively reaching for my shirt before she woke, or lingering a moment longer at the door, just to hear the soft rustle of her movements as she prepared for the day. Her scent, a delicate blend of lavender and horse, became a subtle, comforting anchor in the quiet hours of the night. We fell into a routine, a comfortable dance of unspoken understanding. At breakfast, she'd pour my coffee without asking, and I'd pass her the butter without a word. In the evenings, after the chores were done, we'd sit on the porch, watching the twilight paint the mountains in hues of purple and gold. We didn't always speak. Sometimes, the silence was enough, a quiet companionship that felt surprisingly natural. Silas, however, was a persistent shadow. He lingered in Promise Creek, a constant, unsettling presence, his sharp eyes watching our every move. He made unannounced visits to the ranch, his questions deceptively casual, his gaze scrutinizing every interaction between Lydia and me. He'd comment on my clothes, my rough hands, the way I sometimes forgot to address Lydia as my dear. Each casual observation was a thinly veiled attempt to expose our fraud. One afternoon, Silas cornered me by the stables, his voice low and conspiratorial. "You know, Caleb," he began, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Lydia is a fragile thing. Strong-willed, yes, but susceptible to influence, especially when her ranch is at stake." He paused, letting the implication hang in the dusty air. "A man of your background might find himself well compensated for certain information, or for simply ensuring the ranch doesn't prosper under her management." My jaw tightened. The insult was clear, the bribe thinly disguised. He was trying to buy me, to turn me against Lydia, to dismantle her dreams from within. I looked him dead in the eye, my voice as flat and unyielding as the Arizona rock. "I'm a farmhand, Mr. Weston. My work is honest. And I'm a husband. My loyalty is to my wife." Silas's smile faltered, a flicker of surprise, then a hardening of his gaze. He knew then that I wasn't as easily bought as he'd hoped. He walked away, his polished boots kicking up dust, but I could feel his gaze lingering, a silent threat. The deception wasn't just about Silas. It was about the town, too. We had to convince everyone, from the nosy gossips to the skeptical merchants, that our marriage was real. We'd go to town together, buy supplies, exchange pleasantries with the locals. I'd make sure to keep a hand on her back, to pull out her chair, to offer her small, everyday courtesies that a husband would show his wife. Lydia, in turn, would sometimes rest her hand on my arm or offer a shared smile, her eyes conveying a subtle warmth that was both convincing and, to my surprise, increasingly genuine. These small, intimate gestures, initially performed for an audience, began to subtly shift our relationship. There was a quiet domesticity that began to take root. I found myself anticipating her needs, noticing the small details of her day. I'd fix a loose board on the porch without being asked, or lead her tired mare to the water trough after a long day of riding. She, in turn, would leave a clean shirt folded on my side of the bed, or brew a fresh pot of coffee just as I was waking. One evening, after a particularly long and arduous day mending a broken fence, I returned to the ranch house, my body aching, my muscles screaming. Lydia was in the kitchen, humming softly as she kneaded dough for bread. She looked up as I entered, her eyes softening as they took in my weary frame. "Rough day?" she asked, her voice gentle. I grunted, leaning against the door frame. Fence line collapsed. Had to rebuild a good section. She wiped her hands on her apron. "Go wash up. I'll make you a hot meal. And I've drawn a bath for you." The words were simple, practical, yet they hit me with a surprising force. A bath, a hot meal, someone caring for my comfort. It was a domesticity I'd never known, a quiet tenderness that settled deep within my chest. I looked at her, truly looked at her, standing there in the warm glow of the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour, her eyes soft with concern. And for the first time, the lie felt less like a burden and more like a gentle embrace. The line between pretend and real began to blur. The touch of her hand, the shared glances, the quiet companionship, they were no longer just for show. They were becoming ingrained, a natural part of my existence. I found myself wanting to protect her, not just the ranch, but her, Lydia, the woman whose quiet strength had captured my surprising admiration. And as the days ticked closer to her birthday, the idea of our arrangement ending, of this comfortable, unexpected life disappearing, filled me with a quiet, unsettling dread. The days, heavy with the weight of expectation, and the relentless Arizona sun, dwindled to a precious few before Lydia's 25th birthday. The tension at the Whispering Pines was a palpable thing, thick in the air, a constant hum beneath the surface of our carefully constructed normalcy. Silas, like a vulture circling its prey, was more present than ever, his visits more frequent, his questions sharper, his scrutiny more intense. He was looking for any crack, any fissure in our carefully crafted facade. One evening, Silas arrived unexpectedly, his presence like a sudden chill in the warm, dust-laden air. He brought with him a lawyer, a man with a perpetually pinched expression and an air of self-importance. They insisted on reviewing the ranch's ledgers, scrutinizing every expenditure, every income stream, searching for proof of financial mismanagement that would justify Silas's claim. Lydia, her face pale but resolute, led them to her father's old study. I stood by the door, a silent, imposing presence, my arms crossed, my gaze unwavering as I watched them. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with fear, but with a fierce protectiveness. I could feel Lydia's anxiety, a subtle tremor in the air around her, but she held herself with remarkable composure, answering their questions with precise, unwavering facts. Silas, however, was relentless. He pointed to dwindling cattle numbers, to the cost of a new well, to the low yield of the last harvest, all unavoidable consequences of the prolonged drought. "This ranch is bleeding money, Lydia," he stated, his voice dripping with false concern. "It's a burden. You're simply not capable of managing it. It's best for everyone if it reverts to my care." Lydia's jaw tightened. "The drought has been hard on everyone, Uncle Silas. We're making it through. We'll replenish the herd. We'll drill another well if we have to. With what money, my dear? My dear?" Silas sneered, his eyes glinting with triumph. "The ledgers speak for themselves," You're on the brink of ruin. That's when I stepped forward, my voice low and steady. The ranch is solvent, Mr. Weston, and it will prosper. Silas turned, his eyes narrowing. And what do you know about it, Farmhand? You're just a temporary fixture here, aren't you? Just a placeholder. My eyes met his, and I let a flicker of my true feelings show not just the protective husband, but the man who truly cared. I know a good deal about honest work, Mr. Weston, and I know a good deal about commitment. This ranch and my wife are my commitment. I placed my hand on Lydia's shoulder, a firm, reassuring touch. Her eyes, filled with a surprising depth of emotion, met mine for a fleeting moment, a silent acknowledgment of the strength I was projecting. The lawyer, a nervous man, cleared his throat. Well, Mr. Weston, the ledgers, while concerning, do not yet indicate insolvency, and with the marriage, the will states a marriage must occur by the 25th birthday. It does not stipulate the financial health of the ranch at that exact moment. He looked at me, a hint of grudging respect in his eyes. The marriage does complicate things, Silas. It appears to be valid, and the ranch is, for the moment, legally secure. Silas's face contorted in a mask of fury. He slammed his fist on the table. This is a farce, a deception. You married a farmhand, Lydia, a man with nothing. This is clearly a ploy. It is a marriage, Uncle, Lydia stated, her voice unwavering, despite the tremor I felt in her shoulder. And Caleb is my husband. The ranch is mine. Silas, defeated for the moment, stomped out of the study, the lawyer scurrying after him. The heavy silence that followed his departure was filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Lydia sank into her father's worn mother chair, her shoulders slumping, a profound weariness settling over her. I knelt beside her, my hand still on her shoulder. He'll be back, I said, my voice gentle. He won't give up easily. She nodded, her eyes closed. I know. She opened her eyes, meeting my gaze, and for the first time I saw raw, unfiltered emotion in their depths. Gratitude, relief, and something deeper, something unspoken. You were magnificent, Caleb. Thank you. The gratitude in her voice, the sincerity in her eyes, felt more real than any payment I could have received. It was a warmth that spread through my chest, a powerful affirmation. The lie, I realized, had become deeply, irrevocably intertwined with the truth. That evening, as we sat on the porch, the moon casting a silver glow over the silent ranch, Lydia spoke, her voice soft, almost a whisper. You know, she began, I never thought I'd marry. Not like this. My life has always been about the ranch, about survival. Mine too, I admitted, my gaze fixed on the distant mountains. Just in a different way, moving from place to place. No roots. Do you regret it? She asked, her voice hesitant. This arrangement? I turned, my gaze meeting hers. The moonlight softened the angles of her face, highlighting the delicate curve of her cheek, the earnestness in her eyes. The scent of lavender and the dry earth mingled around us, a comforting blend. No, Lydia, I said, the words slow and deliberate, filled with a truth I hadn't fully articulated even to myself. I don't regret it. Not at all. My heart beat a steady rhythm, no longer just a functional pump, but a silent testament to a feeling that was growing, blossoming in the unexpected soil of our pretend marriage. She looked away, a faint blush rising on her cheeks, but I saw the slight curve of a smile on her lips. The air between us, usually filled with the unspoken formality of our arrangement, now thrummed with a new, fragile intimacy. The line between what was real and what was pretend had blurred entirely, leaving behind a profound, undeniable truth. And as her birthday dawned, a new chapter began, not just for the ranch, but for us. The lie was over. The truth was about to begin. The day after Lydia's 25th birthday dawned clear and bright, the sun washing over the whispering pines with a renewed promise. Silas Weston, defeated and fuming, had packed his bags in the dead of night, his hasty departure a silent acknowledgment of his loss. The ranch was legally, undeniably, irrevocably Lydia's. The weight of the lie, which had pressed down on us for weeks, was suddenly lifted, leaving behind a vast, echoing space. That morning, breakfast was a quiet affair. The usual clatter of forks against plates, the soft sounds of coffee being poured, seemed magnified in the stillness. Lydia, her eyes a little brighter than usual, her shoulders visibly lighter, sat across from me. The unspoken question hung between us, a silent chord vibrating in the quiet room. What now? After the dishes were cleared, and the last traces of morning light filtered through the kitchen window, Lydia turned to me, her hands clasped in front of her, her gaze steady but tinged with a new, unfamiliar uncertainty. "Caleb," she began, her voice soft, "the ranch is safe. Silas is gone. Our agreement, it's fulfilled." She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. We can talk about the annulment now." My heart, which had been beating with a quiet contentment all morning, gave a sharp, painful lurch. The word, annulment, echoed in the silence, chilling the warmth that had begun to settle within me. I had known this day would come. I had prepared for it, intellectually. But emotionally, I was woefully unprepared. The comfortable rhythm of our days, the quiet companionship, the subtle domesticity that had woven itself into the fabric of my life, it all threatened to unravel. I looked at her, truly looked at her, her face illuminated by the morning sun, and saw not just the determined ranch owner, but the woman whose quiet strength had captivated me, whose vulnerability had stirred a protective instinct I hadn't known I possessed. I saw the laughter lines around her eyes, the faint smudges of dirt that were a testament to her dedication, the gentle curve of her lips that I'd come to cherish. But thought of walking away, of returning to my solitary, drifting existence, was a sharp, bitter pang. My life before her seemed empty, without purpose. "Lydia," I began, my voice rough, my throat unexpectedly tight. "Is that what you want?" She lowered her gaze, her fingers fiddling with the hem of her apron. "It was the agreement, Caleb. You helped me save the ranch. You kept your word. I owe you a great deal." "It's not about what you owe me," I interrupted, stepping closer, my hand reaching out, hovering uncertainly near hers. "It's about what this has become." Her eyes lifted, meeting mine, and I saw a flicker of the same uncertainty, the same nascent hope that I felt. Her breath hitched, a faint gasp. "I never planned to marry," I confessed, the words tumbling out, raw and honest. "Never planned anything, really. Just drifted. But being here, with you, it's different. It's better." My voice dropped to a near whisper. "Lying never felt so real, Lydia. And now I don't want it to be a lie anymore." Her gaze widened, her eyes searching mine, as if trying to decipher the depth of my sincerity. The air between us thrummed with unspoken emotions, fragile and potent. "I know it was a lie," I continued, taking another step closer. the distance between us shrinking. A deception. But the feeling's the way I feel about you. That's not pretend, Lydia. That's real. My thumb gently brushed her hand, a feather-light touch that sent a jolt through me. I want to be your husband, Lydia. Your real husband. Not just for the ranch, but for you. Her breath hitched again, a silent gasp. A flush spread across her cheeks, and her eyes, bright with unshed tears, shimmered with a complex mix of surprise, vulnerability, and a burgeoning hope. "Caleb," she began, her voice a fragile whisper, laced with disbelief. "Just tell me," I pressed, my voice low and earnest, my gaze unwavering. "Tell me if it's impossible. Tell me if I'm wrong." She looked away, her gaze sweeping around the familiar kitchen, the sun-drenched space that had witnessed our silent transformation. Then, slowly, she turned back to me, her eyes brimming. "It's not impossible, Caleb," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't expect it either. I never allowed myself to dream beyond the ranch's survival." A single tear escaped, tracing a path through the dust on her cheek. "But the truth is, I don't want you to leave. I don't want you to go back to just drifting." A wave of profound relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. My hand reached out, cupping her face, my thumb gently wiping away the tear. Her skin was soft, warm beneath my touch. "Then let's make it real," I said, my voice thick with emotion, my gaze holding hers. "Let's build something here, together. Something more than just a ranch." Her eyes, still wet, met mine, and a tentative, hopeful smile began to bloom on her lips, a smile that reached her eyes, filling them with a warmth that rivaled the Arizona sun. "Yes, Caleb," she whispered, her voice firming. "Yes." And in that moment, as the sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, the last vestiges of the lie dissolved, leaving behind a profound and undeniable truth. I was no longer just a farmhand. I was a husband. And I was home. My journey had been long, unplanned, and filled with unexpected turns. But it had led me exactly where I was meant to be, to the woman who called me husband, and to a love that was as real and enduring as the land itself. The quiet companionship of the ranch, the scent of lavender and horse, the shared silences, and the burgeoning feelings were no longer part of a deceptive charade. They were the very fabric of our new beginning, a love story as vast and true as the Arizona sky. The days that followed the revelation in the kitchen were filled with a heady mix of exhilaration and a quiet, blossoming joy. The familiar rhythm of ranch life continued, but now every shared glance, every fleeting touch, was imbued with a new, profound significance. The awkwardness of our initial pretend marriage had dissolved entirely, replaced by a comfortable intimacy that felt both natural and utterly miraculous. We began to explore the contours of our new reality, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Our conversations, once confined to ranch matters or the mechanics of our deception, now drifted to dreams, to quiet hopes, to the unspoken desires we both kept hidden. Lydia, usually so reserved, began to share stories of her childhood, of her father's dreams for the whispering pines, of the little joys and sorrows that had shaped her. I, in turn, found myself speaking of my past not as a string of disconnected jobs, but as a journey that, unknowingly, had led me here, to her. Our evenings on the porch, once filled with companionable silence, now held a different kind of quiet, a comfortable quiet, punctuated by soft murmurs and shared smiles. I found myself watching her, captivated by the way the twilight softened her features, the way her hair caught the last rays of the setting sun. There was a lightness to her now, a freedom that hadn't been there before, as if the burden of the ranch and the lie had been lifted, allowing her true spirit to shine through. One afternoon, as we were mending a section of fence near the southern border, the sun beating down relentlessly, Lydia paused, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her gloved hand. She looked out at the vast, sun-baked landscape, her eyes sweeping over the dry grass and sparse mesquite trees. "This drought has been hard on us, Caleb," she said, her voice tinged with a familiar worry. "Even with Silas gone, the ranch is still struggling. We need to find new water sources, or we won't make it through another year like this." My brow furrowed. I understood the unspoken fear behind her words. The legal battle was won, but the fight for the ranch's survival against the harsh realities of the land was far from over. I thought about the skills I possessed, the knowledge I'd gleaned from years of working on different ranches, facing down various challenges. My experience wasn't just in mending fences and breaking horses. It was in resilience, in finding solutions. "We'll find a way, Lydia," I said, my voice firm, my gaze meeting hers. "We'll sink a deeper well, or we'll find a new spring. We'll try everything. We'll make this ranch thrive." She looked at me, a flicker of something akin to surprise, then a deep, abiding trust in her eyes. It was a trust born of shared experience, of knowing that I was no longer a temporary fixture, but a partner. She simply nodded, a small, grateful smile touching her lips. Our partnership extended beyond the daily chores. We began to brainstorm, to strategize. We rode the boundaries of the ranch together, searching for promising geological formations that might indicate underground water. We discussed new breeds of cattle more resistant to drought, alternative crops that required less water, even the possibility of expanding into different ventures if the ranch's core business continued to suffer. Our dreams for the Whispering Pines, once hers alone, were now ours, intertwined and deeply felt. The town, slowly but surely, began to accept the reality of our marriage. The initial whispers of suspicion gradually faded, replaced by grudging acceptance, and sometimes even genuine warmth. When we went to the general store, Mrs. Gable, the owner, would offer a kind word, a gentle inquiry about our day. Children, initially shy, would now wave as we rode by. The subtle shift in public perception was a balm, allowing us to shed the last remnants of our performed roles and truly step into our genuine identities as husband and wife. Silas, however, wasn't entirely out of the picture. Though he'd left Promise Creek, he left behind a trail of disgruntled ranch hands he'd swayed during his scheming, and whispers of his continued attempts to undermine Lydia's authority from afar. There were subtle acts of sabotage, a fence cut here, a watering trough mysteriously drained there. Nothing major enough to prove malicious intent, but enough to cause frustration and delay. One morning we discovered a section of the main corral fence had been deliberately damaged, not by weather or wear, but by intentional force. My jaw tightened. "Silas," I muttered, my voice grim. Lydia's face was etched with weary frustration. "He's still trying to make us fail, isn't he?" "He won't," I said, my hand instinctively reaching for hers, my fingers intertwining with hers. "Not as long as I'm here. Not as long as we're together." Her fingers tightened around mine, a silent acknowledgement of our shared purpose. The challenges of the ranch, the lingering threat of Silas, instead of pulling us apart, seemed to only bind us closer. We were a team, a unit. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. We sat on the porch swing, the faint scent of night blooming jasmine drifting on the breeze. My arm was around her, her head resting against my shoulder, a comfortable intimacy that now felt utterly natural. "Caleb," she said, her voice soft, "do you ever think about Ash, where we'd be if all of this hadn't happened?" I considered it, picturing my former life, the solitary meals, the transient towns, the endless, unchanging horizon. It felt cold, empty. "I'd be somewhere else," I admitted, my voice low, doing the same work, seeing the same sunrises. But it wouldn't be like this. It wouldn't be a home. She stirred, nestling closer against my shoulder. "It is home, isn't it?" Her voice was a whisper, filled with a deep contentment. I tightened my arm around her, pressing a kiss to her hair, inhaling the comforting scent of lavender and her own unique sweetness. More than I ever knew a place could be. The lie, the necessity that had brought us together, had paved the way for a truth far more profound, far more beautiful than either of us could have ever imagined. I was just a farmhand. Then she called me husband. And now I was truly hers. And she was truly mine. The ranch, our home, was not just land and cattle. It was the foundation of our new beginning, a testament to the unexpected power of a love that bloomed in the most unlikely of circumstances. The whispers of Silas's continued interference, though subtle, intensified over the next few months. We'd find tools missing from the barn, gate latches loosened, or, more insidiously, rumors spreading through Promise Creek about Lydia's supposed mismanagement, her supposed inexperience. He was a spider, weaving a web of petty sabotage and misinformation, hoping to slowly strangle the whispering pines and force Lydia into a position where she'd have no choice but to sell. The drought, meanwhile, continued its relentless grip. The well, even after we deepened it, yielded less water each week. The grass, once a vibrant green, had turned to brittle straw. The cattle, though diligently tended, grew leaner, their ribs showing through their hides. Lydia's worry, a constant shadow in her eyes, deepened with each cloudless sky. "We can't keep this up, Caleb," she confessed one evening, her voice raw with despair, as we surveyed the dwindling water in the trough. "The cattle, they're suffering. We might have to sell off a portion of the herd." The words were a knife in her voice, a betrayal of her father's legacy. My heart ached for her. I knew what this ranch meant to her, how every acre, every animal, was a testament to her family's resilience. "We'll find another way, Lydia," I insisted, my voice firm, though uncertainty gnawed at me too. "We always do." But solutions were proving elusive. I spent hours poring over old maps of the territory, searching for forgotten springs, for any indication of underground waterways. I rode the boundaries of the ranch until my legs ached and my horse was lathered in sweat, my eyes scanning every inch of the dry landscape. Nothing. The land was parched, unforgiving. One sweltering afternoon, as I was desperately trying to repair a failing pump, a rider approached the ranch, kicking up a plume of dust against the shimmering heat haze. It was a local rancher, Old Man Hemlock, his face weathered and grim. "Caleb, Lydia," he began, his voice gravelly. "I've just heard some unsettling news from out west. Word from Tucson is that Silas Weston is putting together a consortium. He's buying up water rights to some of the main supply routes to Promise Creek. He's trying to cut off our access." Lydia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. This wasn't petty sabotage. This was a direct assault, a calculated move to cripple the entire region, to force the smaller ranchers, including the Whispering Pines, into ruin. Silas wasn't just after her ranch, he was trying to establish a monopoly over the region's most vital resource. He's trying to starve us out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. The insidious nature of Silas's plan ignited a cold fury within me. This wasn't just about property, it was about lives, about the very survival of Promise Creek. Lydia's face was pale, but her eyes, though filled with fear, also held a spark of defiant fire. He won't win. We won't let him. But how to fight a man who controlled the water? Our resources were already stretched thin. Legal action would be slow and expensive, and we couldn't afford to wait. The cattle were dying. The land was dying. That night, sleep eluded us. We lay in the comfortable darkness of our bedroom, the silence heavy with the weight of our shared worry. Lydia turned to me, her voice a whispered plea. What do we do, Caleb? What can we possibly do? I pulled her closer, my arm wrapping around her, her head resting on my chest. I felt the frantic beat of her heart against my own. I thought about my past, about the endless miles I'd ridden, the vast, empty landscapes I'd traversed. I thought about the hidden springs, the forgotten trails, the desperate gambles of men trying to carve out a living in the harshest of conditions. Then, a flicker of an idea, a memory from an old dusty map I'd seen years ago, when I was working on a small ranch far to the west. It was a legend, really, whispered among old-timers, a forgotten canyon, rumored to hold a perennial spring, hidden deep within the treacherous, unexplored reaches of the Black Mesa. It was dangerous, almost mythic, and considered impassable. But if it truly existed, and if it held water, there might be a way, I said, my voice low, filled with a nascent hope, yet tempered with the harsh reality of the challenge. An old legend. A hidden spring in the Black Mesa. It's a long shot, Lydia. And it's dangerous. She lifted her head, her eyes wide in the darkness, catching the faint moonlight from the window. Dangerous how? Treacherous terrain, unmarked trails, and it's deep in hostile territory. Away from any established routes, no one's ever confirmed it exists. Most think it's just a tall tale. Her gaze met mine, and even in the dim light, I could see the fire of determination rekindling in their depths. But if it does it, if it holds enough water to sustain us, it would be worth any risk, wouldn't it? I nodded, pressing a kiss to her hair. It would be everything. The gamble was immense. The journey, treacherous. But the alternative was ruin. And I wasn't about to let Lydia, or the Whispering Pines, fall into Silas Weston's grasping hands. This fight was no longer just about a ranch. It was about survival. It was about our future. And it was a fight I intended to win. The decision to seek the legendary spring in the Black Mesa was a desperate one, born of necessity and a dwindling supply of options. The Black Mesa was a formidable barrier, a jagged, unforgiving landscape rumored to be home to ancient spirits and treacherous beasts. Locals, even the most seasoned cowboys, avoided it, their stories painting it as an impassable fortress of rock and shadow. We prepared meticulously. Lydia, ever the pragmatist, compiled a list of essential supplies: dried jerky, hardtack, enough water to last us several days until we hopefully found a source, extra rope, sturdy tools, and medical supplies. She insisted on coming with me, her eyes firm with resolve. "This is my ranch, Caleb," she stated, her chin lifted. My fight. I won't send you into danger alone. I argued, citing the inherent dangers, the brutal terrain, the risks of leaving the ranch vulnerable. But her stubborn determination was a familiar force, one I'd come to admire. And truthfully, the thought of facing that desolate wilderness without her quiet strength and unwavering belief, was a far more daunting prospect than the physical perils of the mesa. We left just before dawn, riding our most reliable horses, the air still cool and crisp, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant sage. The ranch, silent and watchful, receded behind us, a beacon of hope and home we prayed to return to. The first few days were a brutal test of endurance. The terrain grew progressively harsher, the gentle slopes giving way to jagged canyons and narrow winding passes. The sun beat down mercilessly, sucking the moisture from our bodies, and the dust, stirred by our horses' hooves, coated everything. We rationed our water carefully, each sip a conscious act of survival. The nights were cold, the vast expanse of the desert sky, a canvas of brilliant stars, but sleep was restless, punctuated by the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness and the ever-present gnawing worry. Lydia proved to be an invaluable companion. Her keen eye spotted ancient, faded trail markers that I might have missed. Her steady hand helped guide the horses through precarious passes, and her unwavering spirit, even when exhausted, was a constant source of strength. She never complained, never wavered, simply pressed on, her determination a silent driving force. One afternoon, as we navigated a particularly steep and rocky ascent, Lydia's mare stumbled, dislodging a cascade of loose rock. The mare whinnied in panic, its front hooves scrabbling for purchase, threatening to plunge both horse and rider down a perilous drop. My heart leaped into my throat. "Lydia!" I shouted, my voice raw with fear. Reacting instinctively, I lunged forward, grabbing the mare's bridle with one hand, my other arm wrapping around Lydia's waist, pulling her from the saddle just as the horse slid precariously close to the edge. The mare, freed from its rider's weight, regained its footing, snorting in fear. Lydia, wide-eyed and breathless, was held securely against my chest. "Are you all right?" I asked, my voice still rough with adrenaline, my grip tight around her. She nodded, her face pale, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Yes, you saved me, Caleb." Our eyes met, and in that moment, in the face of raw danger, the last vestiges of pretense, of formality, dissolved entirely. The kiss was sudden, unplanned, born of adrenaline and profound relief. It was a raw, desperate affirmation of life, of our connection, of a love that had grown beyond the bounds of any agreement. Her lips were soft, warm, tasting of dust and fear, yet imbued with an intoxicating sweetness. It was a kiss that sealed our bond, not with legal vows, but with the searing truth of our emotions. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, the silence between us was thick with unspoken words. A faint blush rose on Lydia's cheeks, and her eyes, still wide with a mixture of shock and wonder, held a new, deeper vulnerability. "We should keep moving," she whispered, her voice a little shaky. I nodded, my own heart hammering a wild rhythm against my ribs. The brush with danger, the unexpected intimacy, had irrevocably altered the landscape of our relationship. There was no going back to the comfortable pretense. Days later, battered and exhausted, our water dangerously low, we stumbled upon it. Not a grand, flowing river, but a narrow, winding canyon, its walls verdant with moss and ferns. And nestled at its heart, a small, crystalline pool, fed by a thin, steady stream trickling from a fissure in the rock. The water was clear, cold, and utterly life-giving. The air itself felt different, cooler, vibrant with the scent of damp earth and unseen life. The legend was real. We knelt by the spring, scooping the water into our cupped hands, drinking deeply, the pure liquid washing away the thirst and the weary miles. It was a moment of profound relief, of hard-won triumph. "We found it," Lydia whispered, her voice thick with emotion, tears mingling with the water on her face. "We actually found it." I looked at her face streaked with dirt and tears, her eyes shining with hope, and felt an overwhelming surge of love. This woman, my wife, had braved the wilderness, faced danger, and never once wavered. She was as resilient as the land itself, and as beautiful as the rarest wild flower blooming in the desert. "Now," I said, my voice firm, filled with a renewed purpose. "We just have to figure out how to get this water back to Promise Creek." The discovery was just the beginning. The real work, the real fight for the Whispering Pines, was about to begin. But now, we faced it not as partners in a deception, but as husband and wife, united by love and a shared, unwavering determination. The discovery of the hidden spring was a revelation, a lifeline extended in the parched heart of the Black Mesa. But the spring's existence was only half the battle. The monumental task of getting that water to the Whispering Pines, to Promise Creek, loomed before us. The spring was nestled deep within a treacherous canyon, its flow barely a trickle. Piping it all the way to the ranch was an impossible feat with our limited resources. As we rested by the cool, life-giving water, a new plan began to form in my mind, audacious and risky, born from my years of observing the unforgiving ways of the land. It wasn't about piping the water to us, it was about bringing the cattle to the water. "We can't build a pipeline," I explained to Lydia, sketching rough diagrams in the dirt with a stick. "But we can create a new cattle trail, a secret one, through this canyon, leading directly to the spring." My finger traced a path over the rough terrain. It would be dangerous, narrow, and only navigable for a limited number of animals at a time, but it would provide enough water to sustain the herd during the worst of the drought. It would keep Silas from starving us out. Lydia's eyes widened, a flicker of hope mixed with skepticism. "A secret trail? Through this maze? It's impassable, Caleb. No one knows these parts." "Exactly," I countered, a grim satisfaction in my voice. "That's why Silas won't expect it. We clear the path, widen the narrowest sections, and keep it hidden. We use it only when absolutely necessary, to rotate the herd through, giving them access to this water source." The task was monumental. It would require weeks, possibly months, of back-breaking labor. We'd have to blast through rock, clear fallen debris, and carve a discernible path through the hostile terrain. But it was a viable solution, a desperate gamble that held the promise of salvation. We spent the next few weeks in the canyon, working from dawn till dusk. We used what few tools we had, pickaxes and shovels, leveraging natural fissures in the rock, slowly, painstakingly carving out a rudimentary trail. The work was brutal, our muscles screaming, our hands raw and blistered. But we worked together, our movements synchronized, our unspoken understanding a powerful bond. Lydia, despite her smaller stature, pulled her weight, her determination unwavering, her spirit a constant source of inspiration. During those long, arduous days, isolated from the outside world, Our relationship deepened in ways I hadn't thought possible. The walls we'd both unconsciously erected over years of solitary living crumbled entirely. We shared our fears, our hopes, our quiet dreams for a future that now seemed tantalizingly within reach. The kiss by the precipice had been a spark these weeks in the wilderness were the slow, steady burn that forged our love into something unyielding. One evening, as we sat by a small fire, the stars a brilliant canopy above us, Lydia leaned against my shoulder, her head resting on my chest. "I never imagined my life like this, Caleb," she whispered, her voice soft. "Married to a man I barely knew, carving a path through a mountain, fighting for every drop of water. Is it so bad?" I asked, my voice gentle, my arm tightening around her. She smiled, a soft, contented sound. "No, it's better than I ever dreamed, because it's with you." Her words, so simply spoken, filled me with a warmth that rivaled the fire. I pressed a kiss to her hair, inhaling the familiar scent of dust, sweat, and her own unique sweetness. This barren, treacherous canyon, this place of desperate struggle, had become a crucible for our love, forging a bond stronger than any mountain rock. Finally, after weeks of relentless labor, the rudimentary trail was complete. It was rough, barely more than a goat path in places, but it was traversable. We marked it subtly, with cairns of stones and inconspicuous notches on ancient trees, ensuring only we would recognize the way. We rode back to the Whispering Pines, exhausted but triumphant. The ranch, though still parched, felt like a beacon of hope. The herd, restless and suffering, would soon have access to water. The next few weeks were a desperate scramble. We began the slow, careful process of moving small groups of cattle to the hidden spring, rotating them through the narrow, treacherous trail. It was a laborious process, but the results were undeniable. The cattle, once gaunt, slowly began to regain their strength, their coats shimmering with renewed health. The ranch was surviving. Silas, meanwhile, grew increasingly agitated. His spies reported cattle appearing healthier, but he couldn't understand how. He rode out to the ranch frequently, his face contorted with frustration, his eyes scanning the landscape, searching for the source of our mysterious reprieve. He tried to cut off the main water supply to Promise Creek entirely, a ruthless move that sparked outrage among the other ranchers. But our herd, sustained by the secret spring, was enduring. One afternoon, as I was leading a small group of replenished cattle back to the ranch, I spotted movement on the distant ridge. A lone rider, too far to identify, but the way he moved, the way he surveyed the land, sent a prickle of unease down my spine. Silas. He was still searching, and I knew, with a cold certainty, that he wouldn't stop until he discovered our secret, or until the Whispering Pines finally withered and died. The stakes had never been higher. We had found the water, carved the path, and built a love that was stronger than any challenge. But the final confrontation, the real battle for our future, was still to come, and I would fight, with every ounce of strength and ingenuity I possessed, to protect Lydia, to protect our love, and to protect the land that had become our home. The subtle acts of sabotage from Silas intensified, becoming bolder, more aggressive. Fences were not just cut, sections were deliberately pulled down, allowing cattle to wander. Watering troughs were not just drained, they were contaminated. His desperation to force Lydia's hand, to ruin her and seize the Whispering Pines, reached a fever pitch as he watched our herd inexplicably recover, their condition improving despite the ongoing drought and his attempts. to monopolize water. He must have known we had found an alternative water source. His rage, a palpable thing, radiated across the miles. His frustration was a dangerous fire, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he made his move. One sweltering morning, as I was returning from a rotation of cattle at the hidden spring, I saw him, Silas. He was on foot, not far from the entrance to the narrow canyon, his face grim, his eyes sweeping over the landscape, searching for any sign of a hidden path. He was too close. He was dangerously close to discovering our secret. My heart pounded against my ribs. If he found the spring, if he exposed our lifeline, everything we had fought for, everything we had built, would be lost. He would destroy the spring, or, more likely, seize control of it, effectively holding Promise Creek hostage. I dismounted, carefully tethering my horse in a secluded copse of mesquite, and moved silently through the dry brush, paralleling his path. He was a cunning man, perceptive, and I knew I couldn't simply overpower him without drawing unwanted attention. I had to divert him, to misdirect him. He was examining a particularly dense thicket of thorny scrub, his movements slow and deliberate, when I made my move. I dislodged a loose stone, sending it skittering down a nearby slope, creating a faint but distinct sound. Silas's head snapped up, his eyes darting towards the sound, his hand instinctively going to the pistol at his hip. He moved towards the noise, his suspicion piqued. I used the distraction to circle around, positioning myself behind a large, ancient juniper tree. When he was just past my hiding spot, I spoke, my voice low and steady, tinged with a hint of challenge. "Looking for something, Silas?" He spun around, his pistol already drawn, his eyes narrowed, searching for the source of my voice. He spotted me, leaning casually against the tree, my arms crossed, his face contorted in a sneer. "So, the farmhand emerges from his hiding spot," he spat, his voice laced with contempt. "Still playing husband, are we? This charade won't last, Thorn. The ranch is failing. You'll be gone soon enough, and then the true owner will take what's rightfully his." "The ranch is not failing, Silas," I stated, my voice even, "and it will never be yours. Not now, not ever." His eyes narrowed further. "You found water, didn't you? Some hidden spring?" "I knew it. You're holding out on the rest of Promise Creek, aren't you? Selfish, just like that father of hers. The water is for the whispering pines," I said, my gaze unwavering. "And the path to it is ours alone. You won't find it." "Oh, I will," he snarled, taking a step towards me, his pistol aimed casually at my chest. "And when I do, I'll expose your little secret. I'll make sure the whole town knows what kind of deceitful wretches you both are. And then, the ranch will be mine, and Lydia will be begging for scraps." His words, aimed to provoke, ignited a cold fury within me. He wasn't just threatening the ranch. He was threatening Lydia, threatening our life together. My hand, without conscious thought, went to the hunting knife I kept sheathed at my belt. "You won't lay a hand on her, Silas," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Not while I'm alive." He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You're just a farmhand, Thorn, a brute. You think you can stand against me? I'll ruin you. I'll ruin her. I'll take everything she holds dear." It was then that I truly understood the depth of his malice. It wasn't just about the ranch anymore. It was about destroying Lydia, about stripping her of everything she loved. And that, I realized, I could not allow. I lunged, not at him directly, but to the side, kicking up a cloud of dust that momentarily obscured his vision. He fired, the shot echoing through the canyon, but it went wide. Before he could regain his footing, I was on him, my movements quick and decisive, fueled by a protective rage. I disarmed him, the pistol skittering across the dry earth, then pinned him against a large rock, my hand clamped firmly around his throat. His eyes widened in shock, then fear. He struggled, his pampered hands scrabbling at my grip, but I held him fast. "You will leave this ranch, Silas," I growled, my voice rough, low. "You will leave Promise Creek, and you will never, ever threaten Lydia or this land again. Do you understand?" He gasped, struggling for breath, his face turning purple. You'll regret this, Thorn. I'll expose you." "There's nothing to expose," I stated, my voice chillingly calm. "Our marriage is real. Our commitment is real. And this land is ours." I squeezed slightly, not enough to choke him, but enough to convey the gravity of my threat. "If you ever return, if you ever threaten her again, I will ensure you regret it with every breath you take. Do you understand?" His eyes, wide with fear, finally met mine, and in their depths, I saw a flicker of comprehension. A dawning realization that I was not the easily manipulated farmhand he had perceived. He gave a small, desperate nod, a silent surrender. I released him, pushing him away from the rock with a final, contemptuous shove. He stumbled, gasping for air, clutching his throat, his eyes still wide with shock. He didn't look back. He simply scrambled away, a pathetic figure shrinking into the distance. I watched him go, a sense of grim satisfaction settling within me. The immediate threat was neutralized. The snake had been driven from our garden. I returned to my horse, my heart still hammering, but now with a sense of triumph. I mounted, turning my horse towards the whispering pines, towards Lydia, towards our shared future. The fight was far from over. The drought still gnawed at the land, but the greatest obstacle, the most insidious threat, had been removed. And I knew, with an unwavering certainty, that with Lydia by my side, we could face anything. The departure of Silas Weston, though unceremonious and driven by fear, was a profound relief. The oppressive shadow he cast over Promise Creek and the whispering pines finally lifted. The subtle acts of sabotage ceased, and the malicious rumors he had cultivated withered and died without his constant tending. The air on the ranch, once thick with tension, now felt lighter, clearer, filled with a quiet sense of hope. With Silas gone, we could finally focus our full energy on the pressing challenges of the ranch, particularly the ongoing drought. The secret spring in the Black Mesa was our lifeline, and we continued the laborious process of rotating the herd through the treacherous trail. It was a slow, arduous task, but the cattle remained healthy, a testament to our ingenuity and hard work. Lydia, her spirit renewed, embraced the challenges with a fierce determination. She spent hours in the fields, experimenting with drought-resistant crops, researching new irrigation methods, and tirelessly tending to the herd. She possessed a quiet strength, a deep connection to the land that inspired me daily. I, in turn, found myself drawing on my varied experiences, my practical skills, to support her vision. We were a formidable team, our efforts synchronized, our goals aligned. Our days were filled with hard labor, but our evenings were a haven of peace and growing intimacy. We'd sit on the porch swing, watching the brilliant Arizona sunsets, the sky ablaze with hues of orange and purple. We talked for hours about our hopes for the ranch, about the future we were building together, about the quiet joys and challenges of our days. Our hands would often find each other, our fingers intertwining, a silent testament to the love that had blossomed from such an unlikely beginning. One evening, as the first cool breezes of autumn began to whisper through the mesquite trees, Lydia leaned against my shoulder, her voice soft. "It feels different now, Caleb," she murmured. "The ranch. Us. It is different," I agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. "It's real," she smiled, a soft, contented sound. "I never thought I'd feel this way. Never thought I'd have a partner, a true partner, in all of this. I always thought I'd be fighting alone." "You're not alone, Lydia," I said, my voice firm. "Not anymore. You'll never be alone." The long, dry months eventually gave way to the promise of winter. The skies, which had been relentlessly clear, began to gather clouds, hinting at the possibility of rain. The anticipation was a tangible thing, a collective hope among all the ranchers of Promise Creek. And then, one momentous day, the sky opened. Not a gentle drizzle, but a torrential downpour. A deluge that hammered against the roof of the ranch house, drumming a triumphant rhythm. The dry earth, thirsty for so long, greedily absorbed the moisture, sending up a rich, earthy scent that filled the air. We stood on the porch, hand in hand, watching the rain fall, soaking the parched land, washing away the dust of the drought. Lydia's face was wet with rain and tears, her eyes shining with unspeakable relief and joy. "It's a miracle," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I pulled her closer, my arm wrapped tightly around her, sharing in her profound joy. It wasn't just a miracle of rain, it was a miracle of resilience, of perseverance, of a love that had weathered every storm. The ranch began its slow, vibrant recovery. The parched earth turned green, the grasses sprang to life, and the cattle, no longer reliant on the hidden spring, grazed freely on the rejuvenated pastures. The future of the Whispering Pines, once so uncertain, now stretched out before us, filled with promise. Our life together settled into a comfortable, fulfilling rhythm. I was no longer just a farmhand. I was Lydia's husband, a true partner in every sense of the word. We worked the land together, planned for the future, and shared the quiet joys of our growing love. The community of Promise Creek, witnessing our unwavering commitment to each other and the ranch, embraced us fully. We were a part of their fabric, a testament to the enduring spirit of the West. Sometimes, as I rode across the sprawling acres of the Whispering Pines, the sun warm on my face, the wind whispering through the newly green grasses, I would reflect on the twist of fate that had brought me here. I had never planned to marry, never planned anything beyond the next job, the next horizon. But Lydia Weston, with her fierce determination and quiet strength, had changed everything. She had asked me to play a part, to become a husband in a lie. And in doing so, she had revealed a truth more profound than any I could have imagined. The love that blossomed between us was not born of convenience or legal necessity. It was forged in shared struggle, in unwavering trust, in the quiet spaces between spoken words, in the certainty of a hand finding another in the darkness. It was a love that was as deep and vast as the Arizona sky, as resilient as the ancient mountains that watched over us, and as enduring as the land we now called home. I was just a farmhand. Then she called me husband. And now I was home, truly home, for the very first time in my life. The passing of the drought brought not just renewed life to the Whispering Pines, but also a burgeoning sense of stability and prosperity to Promise Creek. The rain, a blessing long awaited, had transformed the parched landscape into a verdant tapestry, and the cattle, strong and healthy, were a testament to our perseverance. The once whispered suspicions about our marriage had faded entirely, replaced by the quiet respect of our neighbors who had witnessed our unwavering dedication to the land and to each other. We were no longer simply the Westons. We were Caleb and Lydia, woven into the very fabric of the community. Our days at the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm of hard work and shared purpose. I rose with the sun, the familiar scent of coffee brewing and the soft clatter of Lydia in the kitchen a comforting start to my day. We'd discuss the day's tasks over breakfast, mending fences, tending to the new calves, planning for the next harvest. Her keen eye for detail and her innate understanding of the land complemented my practical skills and my unwavering physical strength. We worked side by side, our movements often synchronized, our silent understanding a language richer than words. Lydia, in turn, blossomed in this new reality. The constant worry that had etched lines of concern around her eyes slowly softened, replaced by a radiant peace. She spent hours in her father's old study, not poring over ledgers with dread, but planning for the ranch's future, researching new techniques, and corresponding with cattle breeders. Her laughter, once a rare and quiet sound, now echoed more freely through the ranch house, a melody that filled my heart with a profound contentment. One crisp autumn afternoon, as we rode across a newly green pasture, checking on a group of yearlings, Lydia reined in her horse and turned to me, a thoughtful expression on her face. The wind, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, ruffled her hair. "You know, Caleb," she began, her voice soft, "we focus so much on the ranch, on surviving the drought, on a Silas. But now that things are settled, now that we have some breathing room," she paused, her gaze sweeping over the vibrant landscape. "What do you want, truly? For your life? For our life?" Her question, so open and direct, caught me by surprise. For so long my desires had been simple: a decent meal, a place to sleep, honest work. My dreams had been as fleeting as the dust motes dancing in the sun. But now, with Lydia by my side, a future I'd never dared to imagine stretched out before me. I looked at her, truly looked at her, her eyes shining with earnestness, her hair catching the golden light of the afternoon sun. My life, once a meandering, solitary journey, had found its true north in her. "I want what we have, Lydia," I said, my voice low and sincere. This ranch, this home, and you, always you." I reached out, my hand covering hers on the saddle horn, my thumb gently tracing the lines of her calloused palm. I never knew what home felt like until I found it with you. I never knew what it meant to belong. A faint blush rose on her cheeks, and her eyes, brimming with a quiet emotion, met mine. "Belonging," she murmured, the word a soft echo in the vastness of the landscape. "Yes, that's it exactly." We continued our ride in comfortable silence, the question and my answer hanging in the air, solidifying the unspoken promises we'd made to each other. The love that had begun as a desperate deception had evolved into something profound and unbreakable, rooted in shared struggles, mutual respect, and a deep, abiding affection. As winter approached, bringing with it the promise of colder days and long, quiet nights, we spent more time indoors, planning for the coming year. We discussed expanding the cattle herd, diversifying crops, and even the possibility of building a small schoolhouse for the growing number of children in Promise Creek. Our dreams for the Whispering Pines were no longer just about survival. They were about growth, about contribution, about building a legacy together. One evening, as I sat by the fire, mending a bridle, Lydia sat across from me, reading from an old book of poems, her voice soft and melodious. The scene was one of domestic bliss, a stark contrast to the tumultuous days that had brought us together. I looked up from my work, watching her, a profound sense of peace settling over me. She caught my gaze and smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "What are you thinking, Caleb?" "Just thinking," I said, my voice filled with a quiet wonder, about how much life has changed, how much I've changed. I was just a farmhand, drifting, with no plans. Then you called me husband. I paused, the words heavy with meaning. And you made me a man I never knew I could be. You gave me a home, Lydia, a purpose. You gave me everything. She closed the book, her eyes shining with unshed tears, and crossed the room, kneeling before me, her hands closed, reaching for mine. "And you, Caleb," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved this ranch. You saved me. You showed me what true strength and true love really mean. You made me believe in a future I'd given up on." Our fingers intertwined, a silent pledge. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the vast, silent Arizona night stretched towards the endless horizon. But within the walls of the whispering pines, our home, there was warmth and light and a love that had defied all odds, a love that would continue to grow, as real and enduring as the ancient earth itself. The lie was a distant memory, a faint whisper in the wind. The truth, our truth, was the very air we breathed, the foundation of our life, and the promise of every sunrise yet to come. The passing of the drought brought not just renewed life to the whispering pines, but also a burgeoning sense of stability and prosperity to Promise Creek. The rain, a blessing long awaited, had transformed the parched landscape into a verdant tapestry, and the cattle, strong and healthy, were a testament to our perseverance. The once whispered suspicions about our marriage had faded entirely, replaced by the quiet respect of our neighbors who had witnessed our unwavering dedication to the land and to each other. We were no longer simply the Westons, we were Caleb and Lydia, woven into the very fabric of the community. Our days at the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm of hard work and shared purpose. I rose with the sun, the familiar scent of coffee brewing, and the soft clatter of Lydia in the kitchen, a comforting start to my day. We'd discussed the day's tasks over breakfast, mending fences, tending to the new calves, planning for the next harvest. Her keen eye for detail and her innate understanding of the land complemented my practical skills and my unwavering physical strength. We worked side by side, our movements often synchronized, our silent understanding, a language richer than words. Lydia, in turn, blossomed in this new reality. The constant worry that had etched lines of concern around her eyes slowly softened, replaced by a radiant peace. She spent hours in her father's old study, not poring over ledgers with dread, but planning for the ranch's future, researching new techniques, and corresponding with cattle breeders. Her laughter, once a rare and quiet sound, now echoed more freely through the ranch house, a melody that filled my heart with a profound contentment. One crisp autumn afternoon, as we rode across a newly green pasture, checking on a group of yearlings, Lydia reined in her horse and turned to me, a thoughtful expression on her face. The wind, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, ruffled her hair. "You know, Caleb," she began, her voice soft, We've focused so much on the ranch, on surviving the drought, on a Silas. But now that things are settled, now that we have some breathing room, she paused, her gaze sweeping over the vibrant landscape. What do you want, truly? For your life? For our life? Her question, so open and direct, caught me by surprise. For so long, my desires had been simple. A decent meal, a place to sleep, honest work. My dreams had been as fleeting as the dust motes dancing in the sun. But now, with Lydia by my side, a future I'd never dared to imagine stretched out before me. I looked at her, truly looked at her, her eyes shining with earnestness, her hair catching the golden light of the afternoon sun. My life, once a meandering, solitary journey, had found its true north in her. I want what we have, Lydia, I said, my voice low and sincere. This ranch, this home, and you, always you. I reached out, my hand covering hers on the saddle horn, my thumb gently tracing the lines of her calloused palm. I never knew what home felt like until I found it with you. I never knew what it meant to belong. A faint blush rose on her cheeks, and her eyes, brimming with a quiet emotion, met mine. Belonging, she murmured, the word a soft echo in the vastness of the landscape. Yes. That's it exactly. We continued our ride in comfortable silence, the question and my answer hanging in the air, solidifying the unspoken promises we'd made to each other. The love that had begun as a desperate deception had evolved into something profound and unbreakable, rooted in shared struggles, mutual respect, and a deep, abiding affection. As winter approached, bringing with it the promise of colder days and long, quiet nights, we spent more time indoors, planning for the coming year. We discussed expanding the cattle herd, diversifying crops, and even the possibility of building a small schoolhouse for the growing number of children in Promise Creek. Our dreams for the Whispering Pines were no longer just about survival. They were about growth, about contribution, about building a legacy together. One evening, as I sat by the fire, mending a bridle, Lydia sat across from me, reading from an old book of poems, her voice soft and melodious. The scene was one of domestic bliss, a stark contrast to the tumultuous days that had brought us together. I looked up from my work, watching her, a profound sense of peace settling over me. She caught my gaze and smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "What are you thinking, Caleb?" "Just thinking," I said, my voice filled with a quiet wonder, "about how much life has changed, how much I've changed. I was just a farmhand, drifting, with no plans. Then you called me husband." I paused, the words heavy with meaning. "And you made me a man I never knew I could be. You gave me a home, Lydia, a purpose. You gave me everything." She closed the book, her eyes shining with unshed tears, and crossed the room, kneeling before me, her hands reaching for mine. "And you, Caleb," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved this ranch. You saved me. You showed me what true strength and true love really mean. You made me believe in a future I'd given up on." Our fingers intertwined, a silent pledge. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the vast, silent Arizona night stretched towards the endless horizon. But within the walls of the Whispering Pines, our home, there was warmth and light and a love that had defied all odds, a love that would continue to grow, as real and enduring as the ancient earth itself. The lie was a distant memory, a faint whisper in the wind. The truth, our truth, was the very air we breathed, the foundation of our life, and the promise of every sunrise yet to come. The new year dawned with a renewed sense of purpose at the Whispering Pines. The ranch, now thriving after the blessed rains, demanded our full attention. We invested in new cattle, healthier breeds that promised better yields, and Lydia, with her meticulous planning, oversaw the planting of diversified crops in the fields, crops that were more resistant to the unpredictable Arizona climate. The ranch house, once filled with the ghosts of Lydia's past worries, now hummed with a vibrant, hopeful energy. Our days were long, stretching from the rosy glow of dawn to the deep indigo of dusk. I found immense satisfaction in the physical labor, in the feel of the earth beneath my boots, the honest sweat on my brow. But the greatest joy came from sharing it all with Lydia. We would ride out together, inspecting fences, checking on the herd, our conversations flowing easily, punctuated by comfortable silences. I learned to anticipate her needs, to read the subtle shifts in her expressions, and she, in turn, understood my quiet nature, my preference for action over excessive words. One particularly busy spring day, we were branding new calves. The air was thick with the scent of burning hair and dust, the bawling of the calves a constant backdrop. I was strong, accustomed to the work, but even I felt the strain after hours bent over, wrestling the feisty animals. Lydia, despite her smaller frame, worked tirelessly beside me, her movements precise and efficient. She handled the branding iron with a steady hand, her face smudged with dirt and sweat, but her eyes bright with satisfaction. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, we finally finished. Exhausted, we leaned against the corral fence, watching the last of the calves scamper to their mothers. Lydia sighed, a sound of deep contentment. "Another day, another successful branding," she said, her voice tired but triumphant. She turned to me, her gaze soft. "We make a good team, don't we, Caleb?" I smiled, a rare, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of my eyes. "The best, Lydia, the very best." My arm instinctively wrapped around her shoulders, pulling her close. Her head rested against my chest, and I felt the steady beat of her heart mirroring my own. In that moment, surrounded by the sights and sounds of our thriving ranch, I knew a peace I had never experienced. This was more than just a life. It was a profound partnership, built on respect, shared purpose, and a love that grew deeper with each passing day. The relationship with the town of Promise Creek also deepened. We became more involved in community life, attending Sunday services, joining in the occasional town gatherings, and contributing to local initiatives. Lydia, once seen as a reclusive rancher, now emerged as a respected leader, her shrewd business sense and unwavering integrity earning her the admiration of her peers. I, the quiet farmhand who had married above his station, found myself accepted, not just as Lydia's husband, but as Caleb Thorne, a man of his word, a pillar of strength in the community. But even in this newfound tranquility, the ghost of Silas Weston occasionally resurfaced. Whispers reached us from distant towns, tales of his various failed ventures, his attempts to swindle other unsuspecting ranchers. He was a snake, forever seeking to shed his skin and reappear, but his fangs were now dulled, his venom largely ineffective. Yet, a part of me, a protective instinct forged in the fires of our past struggles, remained vigilant. I knew that true malice, once ingrained, was rarely fully extinguished. One brisk morning, a rider from a neighboring ranch brought unsettling news. Silas Weston, desperate and perhaps emboldened by liquor, had been seen lurking near the borders of the Whispering Pines. Not on our land, but close enough to send a ripple of unease through the ranch. The old fear, though diminished, flickered for a moment in Lydia's eyes. "He's still out there," she murmured, her jaw tightening. "Still a threat." I placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "He's a ghost, Lydia. A shadow of his former self. He won't get near this ranch again. I've made sure of that." My voice was firm, resolute. The memory of pinning him against the rock, of the raw fear in his eyes, was a stark reminder of the lengths I would go to protect her. That evening, I doubled our patrols of the ranch boundaries, riding the perimeter until the stars filled the vast, inky sky. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. My primary responsibility, now and always, was Lydia's safety and the security of the home we had built together. The ranch, once a contested prize, was now a sanctuary, a testament to our enduring love and resilience. And I would guard it, and her, with my life. The unspoken promise resonated in the quiet vastness of the Arizona night. The unsettling news of Silas's proximity, though he remained unseen, cast a subtle, disquieting shadow over the thriving peace of the Whispering Pines. Lydia, while outwardly composed, carried a faint tension in her shoulders, a quiet vigilance in her eyes. It was a stark reminder that even after the storm had passed, the ripples of past conflicts could still disturb the calm surface of our lives. I, in turn, maintained a heightened awareness, my senses attuned to any unusual sound, any unfamiliar presence on our vast, open land. My patrols became more frequent, more thorough, my gaze sweeping the horizon for any hint of movement that wasn't native to our ranch. Despite this underlying current of watchfulness, life at the Whispering Pines continued to flourish. The fields yielded abundant harvests, the cattle grew fat on the lush pastures, and the promise of a prosperous future seemed tangible with every passing season. We invested in new equipment, hired more ranch hands from the growing community, and even began discussions about expanding our operations to include a small dairy herd, a venture Lydia had long dreamed of. One crisp autumn morning, as the air was filled with the scent of wood smoke and damp earth, a wagon train, unusual for this time of year, rumbled into Promise Creek. Word spread quickly through the town. A group of new settlers, mostly families from the east, seeking new opportunities in the burgeoning Arizona territory. Among them was a family by the name of Miller, distant cousins of Lydia's, who she hadn't seen in years. Their arrival sparked a ripple of excitement and a touch of trepidation. While Promise Creek welcomed growth, new settlers also brought new challenges, new personalities, and sometimes new problems. Lydia, ever the gracious hostess, invited the Millers to the ranch for dinner, eager to reconnect with family she barely remembered. The Millers arrived that evening, a bustling group of 5. Elias Miller, a stern-faced man with a perpetually furrowed brow, his wife, Sarah, a timid woman who spoke in hushed tones, and their 3 grown children, 2 sons, and a daughter. The daughter, Elora, was a strikingly beautiful young woman, with bright, inquisitive eyes and a flirtatious smile that seemed to linger on me more often than felt comfortable. The dinner was a mixture of strained pleasantries and probing questions. Elias, a shrewd man, seemed overly interested in the details of the ranch's recent prosperity, his eyes lingering on the well-maintained barns and the healthy herd. He asked about the drought, about Silas, about Lydia's remarkable turnaround in managing the ranch. His questions, though veiled as friendly curiosity, had an undercurrent of calculation. Alara, meanwhile, continued to direct her attention towards me. She would subtly lean closer when I spoke, her hand occasionally brushing my arm as she passed a dish, her laughter a little too loud, a little too frequent when I made a casual comment. It was a blatant display of flirtation, one I did my best to ignore, keeping my responses polite but brief, my attention firmly fixed on Lydia. Lydia, however, was not oblivious. I could feel her subtle tension, the slight stiffening of her shoulders whenever Ilara spoke to me. Her smiles, though still gracious, held a hint of reserve. Later that night, as we prepared for bed, the unspoken tension in the room was palpable. "Ilara seems quite taken with you," Lydia remarked, her voice carefully neutral, as she brushed her hair by the vanity. I paused, turning from the window where I had been looking out at the moonlit ranch. "She's just being friendly, Lydia. She's new to town." Lydia met my gaze in the mirror, her eyes a mix of hurt and a quiet insecurity I hadn't seen since the early days of our marriage. "Friendly, perhaps. Or perhaps she sees a handsome, capable man who's settled down and made a good life for himself. A man who, not so long ago, was a drifter." Her words stung, a subtle reminder of the lie that had brought us together, a hint of the insecurity that still lingered beneath the surface of our secure love. I walked over to her, gently taking the brush from her hand and placing it on the vanity. I turned her to face me, my hands resting on her shoulders. "Lydia," I said, my voice low and earnest, my gaze unwavering. "I was a drifter. That's true. But I found my home here. With you. You are my wife. You are my only home." I cupped her face, my thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "Ilara Miller, or any other woman, means nothing to me, nothing compared to you." Her eyes searched mine, and slowly, the tension in her shoulders eased. The insecurity faded, replaced by a glimmer of trust, a deep well of love. She leaned into my touch, her hands coming up to rest on my chest. "I know, Caleb," she whispered, her voice a little shaky. I just don't want anything to jeopardize what we have." "Nothing will," I promised, pulling her closer, my lips finding hers in a soft, reassuring kiss. The kiss was a silent vow, a reaffirmation of our bond, stronger now than ever before. The external threats, whether from a scheming Silas or a flirtatious stranger, only served to highlight the profound, unwavering truth of our love. Our foundation was no longer built on a lie, but on the solid rock of mutual affection and unwavering commitment. The presence of the Miller family, particularly Elias and Ilara, continued to ripple through the quiet calm of the whispering pines. Elias, with his persistent probing questions, seemed to have an insatiable curiosity about the ranch's finances and its methods of overcoming the drought. He would linger after meals, asking about the herd's health, the yield of the new crops, and even subtly trying to ascertain the location of our water sources. His persistent inquiries, veiled as genuine interest, grated on my nerves, reminding me uncomfortably of Silas's past machinations. Ilara, meanwhile, remained a constant, if less direct, source of discomfort for Lydia. She continued her subtle overtures towards me, her smiles too lingering, her compliments too personal. She would find reasons to be near me during ranch work, offering a glass of water when I was mending a fence, or walking alongside me as I rode back to the main house. I maintained my polite distance, my responses brief and professional, but the undercurrent of her attention was undeniable. Lydia, though she rarely spoke of it directly, carried the weight of Ilara's presence. Her smiles at dinner were a little tighter, her gaze occasionally drifting to where Ilara sat, her subtle shifts in posture betraying her quiet unease. It was a new kind of challenge, one that tested the nascent trust we had built, a challenge that struck at the heart of our emotional security. One warm afternoon, as I was repairing a broken wagon wheel outside the barn, Ilara approached, carrying a tray with lemonade. Her movements were graceful, almost theatrical. "Hard work, Caleb," she purred, her voice low and soft. "You're truly a man of strength. Not many men would choose such a demanding life when they could have a more comfortable existence." She lingered, her eyes sweeping over my muscular arms, a thinly veiled invitation in her gaze. I straightened up, wiping sweat from my brow. "It's honest work, Ilara, and I choose it because this is my home." My voice was firm, leaving no room for misinterpretation. She feigned a pout, her lips curving into a practiced smile. "Oh, but a man like you, with your capabilities, you could do so much more. Build an empire, beyond a simple ranch." She took a step closer, her hand reaching out, almost touching my arm. "Don't you ever dream of something grander?" Before I could respond, Lydia's voice, clear and crisp, cut through the air. "Caleb, darling, could you come inside for a moment? I need your help with something." Ilara's hand dropped, her smile faltering. Lydia stood in the doorway of the ranch house, her hands on her hips, her gaze steady and unwavering as it met Ilara's. There was no overt hostility, but an undeniable possessiveness in her tone, a quiet assertion of her claim. I offered Ilara a curt nod. "Excuse me." I walked past her, sensing her frustration, and entered the house, Lydia stepping aside to let me in. "Is everything all right?" I asked, my voice low, as I closed the door behind us. Lydia turned, her gaze softening as it met mine, but a flicker of vexation remained in her eyes. "Just fine. I simply needed to borrow my husband." She paused, then added, her voice a little more vulnerable. "She's insufferable, isn't she?" I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close, resting my chin on Ra. Her head. "She means nothing, Lydia. You know that." I inhaled the familiar scent of her hair, a comforting aroma that grounded me. "And you needed me, didn't you?" She tilted her head back, her eyes looking up at me, a soft smile playing on her lips. "More than you know, Caleb. Always." The incident, though minor, solidified a truth we had both been silently acknowledging. Our love, once a precarious flame, was now a deep, burning fire, capable of withstanding, quote, "external pressures." The presence of Ilara, rather than driving a wedge between us, had inadvertently strengthened our bond, forcing us to confront and reaffirm our commitment to each other. A few days later, Elias Miller approached me with a seemingly generous offer. He proposed a partnership, a joint venture to expand the Whispering Pines, suggesting he could bring in capital and connections. His eyes, however, held a calculating glint, and I sensed a deeper motive behind his words. He was, I suspected, still seeking to gain a foothold, a way to slowly absorb the ranch into his own burgeoning empire. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Miller," I said, my voice polite but firm. "But the Whispering Pines is doing well as it is, and we prefer to keep it a family operation." Elias's smile tightened, a flicker of irritation crossing his features. "A pity. Opportunities like this don't come often, Caleb. A man of your ambition should seize them." His words implied a disrespect, a subtle undermining of my connection to the land, a hint that I was merely a temporary fixture, a farmhand who had gotten lucky. I met his gaze, my own unwavering. "My ambition, Mr. Miller, is to make this ranch prosper for my wife. And we're doing that just fine, on our own terms." He walked away, a silent understanding passing between us. He was no less a threat than Silas, simply more subtle in his approach. I knew then that the challenges to our peace, to our future, would not always come in the form of overt threats. They would sometimes arrive cloaked in pleasantries, hidden behind smiles, demanding a different kind of vigilance. But with Lydia by my side, with our love as our compass, I felt an unshakable confidence. We had faced down drought, deception, and danger. We would face down anything else that came our way, together. The Millers eventually departed Promise Creek, ostensibly to seek opportunities elsewhere, but their lingering presence had subtly shifted the landscape of our lives. Elias's shrewd attempts to infiltrate the ranch, coupled with Alara's overt flirtation, had forced Lydia and me to examine the depth of our commitment to each other, pushing us beyond the initial boundaries of our arranged marriage. The testing had, ironically, forged a stronger, more resilient bond. We had faced down the ghosts of the past and the seductions of the present, emerging with an even deeper understanding of our shared future. With the departure of the Millers, a quiet calm settled over the whispering pines once more. The days unfolded with the familiar rhythm of ranch life, but now, a profound sense of security permeated every aspect of our existence. We were no longer just surviving, we were thriving, building, and dreaming. The ranch, once a source of constant anxiety for Lydia, was now a symbol of her strength, her resilience, and our shared accomplishment. Our discussions turned increasingly towards the future, beyond the immediate needs of the ranch. One cool evening, as we sat by the crackling fire, the scent of burning mesquite filling the air, Lydia turned to me, her hand resting gently on my arm. Her eyes, reflecting the warm glow of the flames, held a tenderness that always stirred something deep within me. "Caleb," she began, her voice soft, almost a whisper, "we have so much now. A home, a prosperous ranch, each other." She paused, her gaze searching mine, a faint blush rising on her cheeks. "Have you ever thought about building our family beyond just us?" My heart gave a sudden lurch. Children. The thought, once so distant, so unimaginable for a drifter like me, now felt incredibly, wonderfully real. It was a future I hadn't dared to dream of, a profound depth of commitment that transcended even the vastness of the land. "Children," I repeated, the word feeling foreign, yet utterly right on my tongue. She nodded, her eyes shining with a tentative hope. "A family. Little ones running through the fields, learning to ride, growing up on this land." She reached out, her fingers intertwining with mine, her grip firm and warm. "Our children, Caleb, yours and mine." A wave of overwhelming emotion washed over me. The quiet, solitary man who had once sought nothing more than a day's wage now envisioned a future filled with the laughter of, quote, "children," the continuity of a legacy. It was a profound shift, a complete transformation of my very being. "Lydia," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "nothing would make me happier." I squeezed her hand, my gaze holding hers. "A family. Our family, yes. More than anything." Her smile bloomed, radiant and utterly beautiful, a vision that filled me with a powerful sense of purpose. We spent the rest of the evening talking, dreaming, sketching out a future that included not just cattle and crops, but the joyous chaos of children, the warmth of a growing family. It was a profound conversation, cementing our future not just as partners in a ranch, but as partners in life, in love, and in the creation of a legacy that would extend far beyond our lifetimes. As the months unfolded, bringing with them the golden hues of summer and the promise of new life, a quiet joy settled over the whispering pines. Lydia's subtle changes were the first indication, then the confirmation from the kind, elderly doctor in Promise Creek. We were to have a child. The news filled the ranch house with a joyous anticipation. Every corner seemed to hum with a new purpose. Lydia, radiant and glowing, moved with a newfound grace, her hands often resting protectively over her burgeoning belly. My own protective instincts, already fierce, intensified tenfold. I watched her constantly, ensuring her comfort, making sure she didn't overexert herself, my gaze often drifting to her, a silent promise of unwavering love and protection. The community of Promise Creek shared in our joy. Mrs. Gable in the general store offered knitting patterns for tiny blankets. Old Man Hemlock offered advice on raising children in the harsh desert, and the other ranchers offered their congratulations and their support. We were truly a part of something larger now, a family woven into the fabric of the community, building a future together. The days of our pretense, of the calculated lie that had brought us together, felt like a distant dream, fading with each passing moment of our shared reality. The whispers of Silas, the subtle threats of the Millers, were mere echoes in the vast, hopeful expanse of our present. Our love, born of necessity, had become a profound, enduring truth, a testament to the unexpected paths life could take, to the remarkable power of two unlikely souls finding their home in each other. One warm evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, Lydia and I sat on the porch swing, my arm wrapped around her, her hand resting in mine, both of us marveling at the quiet miracle growing within her. The air was filled with the scent of blooming night jasmine and the soft sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. "It's going to be a boy, I think," I mused, a soft smile touching my lips. "A strong, quiet boy, just like his father." Lydia chuckled, her hand gently stroking her belly. "Or a spirited, determined girl, just like her mother." She leaned her head against my shoulder, her voice soft with contentment. "Whatever it is, Caleb, it will be ours, and it will be loved." I pressed a kiss to her hair, my heart overflowing. I was no longer just a farmhand. I was a husband, a rancher, and soon a father. My life, once a blank canvas, was now filled with vibrant colors, painted with the brushstrokes of love, family, and belonging. The Whispering Pines, once just a name, was now truly our home, a living testament to the unexpected journey of a man who was just a farmhand, until she called him husband, and then truly made him a man. The future, boundless and bright, stretched before us, a tapestry woven on, with the threads of love, resilience, and the quiet promise of a family that was just beginning.